food and nutrition affects our consciousness very much. The one food that is probably the most problematical, other than the obvious, hallucinogens and things like that, the food that's the most problematic is sugar. Sugar is a problem for the consciousness. And I believe and I just say that experimentally, doing experiments with different foods. When I was at Monroe's, it was very important to me to have a very clear mind, because I was trying to learn how to do this, and I knew the states were subtle, so I needed a very clear mind. So I didn't drink any sort of alcohol. I didn't take any kinds of psychotropic substances. And I still found that my mind would sometimes be clear and sometimes wouldn't. And I wondered why. So I started doing research, being very careful about what I'd eat, when, keep records of it all, and see if I could associate those clear times and those fuzzy times with something that I was eating. And I did, and the culprit was sugar. I found out that if I had anything sweet within about 4 hours or so of going out to the lab, I had fuzzy experiences. And then I tested it quite a bit after that. And my theory about it is that your brain, of course, is just a virtual brain. This is a virtual body. But the virtual body and brain set the constraints on what the consciousness can do with the avatar, according to the rule set. Okay, that's what the body has to do, how the body interacts with the consciousness. The body sets constraints according to the rule set, because the body is a product, an evolved product of the rule set. So it sets the constraints on what the avatar can do, what the consciousness can do with the avatar. So for instance, if you have brain damage, say you're in an accident, you get hit in the head, you have brain damage, that means now that your consciousness has to play a damaged avatar. It has more constraints on the avatar. Just like your elf. If your elf falls off a cliff, he loses hit points, and now the player has to play an elf that's damaged. So it works the same way. So what happens to the brain does affect what the consciousness can do with the avatar. And the biology, which is the rule set of the brain runs on glucose. Glucose is a very important element in the whole body. When you eat sugar, sugar metabolizes in your body and takes about 4 to 5 hours to clear the body. As it's doing that, your glucose levels are in flux. When you first eat it, digest it, the sugar levels go up. Your pancreas secretes insulin that brings them back down. And then that insulin tends to be used up, and they go back up. And you have this up and down. Most people don't go more than a couple of hours without eating some sugar. Almost everything in the culture I come from has sugar in it. It's not quite as bad here as it is in the US, but almost everything has sugar in it. So that means that the sugar, the glucose levels in your brain are unstable. If every 2 or 3 hours you ingest something that takes 4 or 5 hours to work out of your system, you constantly have sugar levels that are just going up and down, which means the basic fundamental power source, if you will, or energy source in the brain is unstable. And I think that's what causes the fog. And I've had a lot of people experiment with this, and most of them, if they remove sugar for at least 3 months, find that it's like getting a higher IQ of about 10 points. They can think better, They see things that otherwise they didn't notice. It's like the fog is lifted from around their mind. And I find it makes a real big difference in the clarity that I have in the awareness of with my consciousness. I'm much clearer. I can force my way through a mind that's fuzzy, but it takes a lot more effort and a lot more focus. Without the sugar, then the focus and the clarity is a much simpler thing. So yes, that's important. Second thing about nutrition is that the non-food crud that we put in our bodies all the time, preservatives, chemicals, artificial things, colors, flavors, whatever, these things can also affect our mind, particularly the preservatives. Preservatives tend to be poisons, and often they are nerve toxins. Now, we get them in very tiny amounts so that we don't notice, but it still has an effect on our central nervous system. And if you have a very sensitive awareness, then you can notice the effect very clearly. So artificial colors and flavors to a lesser extent. Then we get to just the quality of the food we eat. The quality of the food we eat is often terrible where I live. Lots of chemicals, lots of processing. So you have to be careful to try to eat clean, pure, organic food. And it does affect not only your health, but your mind as well. And again, the body, your health, the state of your body puts constraints on what the consciousness can do with the body. So if you have a healthy, fit body and a healthy, fit mind, and all of your internal systems are stable, you're at your best. Doesn't mean that you can't get by with a fuzzy mind. You can. Most everybody here that eats sugar regularly lives in a fuzzy mental state, but you don't know it because you've always lived in a fuzzy mental state. It seems normal. What would seem abnormal is if you stopped the sugar and realized how clear your mind is. It's a gradual process though, so if you cut out sugar, you might, and I mean all kinds of sugar, natural sugar, unnatural sugar, honey, molasses, agave, everything. And things that have sugar in them like apples and bananas and mangoes, don't eat so much of it. You can still eat that if it's in the fruit because it's tied up, the sugar's tied up in the matrix of the fruit. It doesn't digest very quickly. So that sugar gets into your system very slowly and doesn't cause this wild swings quite so easily. But after 3 months of no sugar at all, no artificial sweeteners either, if you then make a mistake and eat some sugar, you'll really see the difference. You won't notice it over the months that it takes to get off of it, but when that mistake happens and suddenly you have some sugar and you feel like you've just had a overdose of antihistamines and your mind's fuzzy and you don't think clearly, then you realize that's the way you used to be all the time and just didn't notice. So it is important.